The surveillance drones had been watching for 37 generations. Hidden beyond the asteroid belt, their quantum sensors recorded every electromagnetic pulse, every radio transmission, every desperate cry that escaped Earth's atmosphere. For 1,000 years, the HFY hegemony had studied humanity with the patience of apex predators, observing grazing animals. Commander Vexhai Morvek adjusted the holographic display floating before his cybernetic implants. The data streams painted humanity as exactly what they appeared to be: fractured, violent, technologically adolescent. Wars raged across their continents. Nuclear weapons threatened their own extinction. Climate change ravaged their ecosystems, while their leaders squabbled over resources like children fighting over scraps. "Perfect prey," whispered strategic analyst Zinthara, her neural tendrils flickering with anticipation. 1,000 years of observation confirms it. They possess no unified command structure, no coherent defense strategy, no awareness of galactic civilization. The hegemony's war council had convened in the flagship Dominion's Edge, a vessel the size of Manhattan that served as the nerve center for the most methodical military campaign in recorded history. 12 species had fallen to the hegemony's expansion protocols. Each conquest had been preceded by centuries of surveillance, psychological profiling, and tactical preparation. The formula was flawless: observe, analyze, overwhelm. But humanity would be different, not because they were stronger or more advanced than previous victims, but because they were so perfectly, completely defenseless. "Review the psychological assessment," ordered Fleet Marshal Kexdin Vorlak, his battle-scarred carapace reflecting the cold light of distant stars. The hologram shifted, displaying behavioral patterns collected across millennia. Humans clustered into tribal groups. They waged war based on primitive concepts like religion and nationalism. Their technology advanced in chaotic spurts, driven by competition rather than cooperation. Most tellingly, they remained ignorant of the greater galaxy. Despite achieving spaceflight, despite landing on their moon, despite sending crewed probes to neighboring planets, humanity showed no evidence of understanding that they were being watched. Their radio telescopes searched for signals from civilizations that had been extinct for eons, while ignoring the sophisticated surveillance network monitoring their every move. "The invasion window opens in 14 solar rotations," announced Navigation Coordinator Elsmir Hadrak. "All task forces report ready status. 300 vessels armed with plasma cannons, atmospheric processors for terraforming, stasis chambers for specimen collection." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. The hegemony would arrive simultaneously above every major human population center. Surrender demands would be broadcast in their primitive languages. When the inevitable resistance began, orbital bombardment would eliminate military installations within minutes. The survivors would be processed according to standard protocols, useful specimens preserved for study, the remainder eliminated to make room for hegemony colonies. "Expected duration?" asked Morvek. "Conservative estimate, 6 hours for complete planetary pacification," replied Zinthara. "The longest phase will be cataloguing their technology for potential salvage value." A ripple of satisfaction passed through the War Council. 6 hours to claim a world that had taken them a millennium to study. The efficiency was almost artistic. What the hegemony didn't realize was that they had been studying shadows on a cave wall, mistaking flickering projections for reality itself. Their sensors, sophisticated enough to detect quantum fluctuations across interstellar distances, had completely missed the most important characteristic of human civilization. It was a performance. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the observation deck of Deep Station Omega, a facility that officially didn't exist, built into an asteroid that cartographers had somehow forgotten to catalogue. Her clearance level was so high, it didn't have a designation. Her work was so classified that even she sometimes forgot what she was working on. 64,000 years, she murmured, watching the tactical display that showed hegemony positions with perfect precision. They've been out there for 64,000 years, and they still think we don't know they exist. Behind her, director Malcolm Kendrick studied reports that would have caused mass panic if released to the public. Reports about humanity's real space program. The one that existed parallel to NASA, hidden behind layers of compartmentalization and misdirection that made the Manhattan Project look like a high school science fair. "The Watchers are moving," announced technical specialist Yuki Tanaka from her console. "Final positioning phase initiated. They'll be in strike formation within 6 days." Kendrick nodded grimly. "Signal all deep cover assets. Operation Plausible Deniability enters final phase. Make sure the surface world sees exactly what we want them to see." The greatest conspiracy in human history hadn't been perpetrated by governments or secret societies. It had been orchestrated by the entire species, guided by a revelation that occurred in 1961, when radio astronomer Frank Drake pointed his telescope at Tau Ceti and discovered that something was pointing back. The signals weren't random. They followed patterns too sophisticated for natural phenomena, too structured to be accidental. Within 5 years, a shadow network of scientists, military personnel, and world leaders had formed to address a terrifying possibility. Humanity was being observed by something vast and patient and utterly alien. The discovery triggered the most audacious deception in the history of intelligent life. If aliens were watching, studying, preparing to make contact or conquest, then humanity's survival depended on controlling what they saw. The public space program became elaborate theater. Real technological advancement continued in hidden facilities scattered across the solar system. Every radio transmission, every satellite launch, every news broadcast was carefully crafted to project the image of a species that posed no threat to galactic civilization. "Activation sequence confirmed for all dormant platforms," reported Tanaka. "Lunar Base reports ready status. Mars Command confirms weapon systems online. Belt stations acknowledge firing solution locks." The irony was exquisite. While the hegemony spent 1,000 years observing what they believed was humanity's complete technological development, the real human civilization had been building a defense network that spanned the solar system. Every asteroid they had dismissed as space debris was actually a weapons platform. Every communications satellite was equipped with systems that would make hegemony technology look quaint. But the deepest irony was that the aliens were absolutely correct about human nature. Humans were violent, fractured, and primitive. The difference was that they had channeled these characteristics into the most sophisticated deception in galactic history. Every war, every conflict, every apparently senseless act of human aggression had served a purpose: maintaining the illusion of a species too chaotic to represent a legitimate threat. The hegemony had documented humanity's bloodiest conflicts with clinical precision. The World Wars, the Cold War, the countless regional conflicts that followed, each one reinforced their assessment of a species locked in perpetual self-destruction. What they failed to realize was that these conflicts had been carefully orchestrated training exercises, designed to develop tactical expertise while maintaining the illusion of a fractured civilization. The world wars had tested humanity's ability to coordinate global logistics and manufacturing. The Cold War had developed communication networks and surveillance technologies. Every subsequent conflict had refined specific military capabilities while ensuring that alien observers saw exactly what they expected: a species too busy fighting itself to pose a threat to anyone else. Dr. Vasquez had devoted her entire career to maintaining this deception. Her official title at NASA was Senior Research Coordinator for Extraterrestrial Signal Analysis. Her actual job was ensuring that humanity's most sophisticated technologies remained invisible to alien surveillance. Every satellite launch was a carefully choreographed performance, designed to conceal weapon deployments behind mundane scientific missions. "Signal intercept from Hegemony Command," reported Technical Officer Ravi Patel. They're broadcasting final tactical assessments to their fleet commanders. Quote, human military capability negligible, estimated resistance duration less than 4 hours. End quote. The assembled personnel in the command center exchanged glances that carried decades of shared preparation. 4 hours. The aliens had spent a millennium studying humanity and concluded that their entire civilization would collapse in less than half a working day. Director Kendrick activated the secure communication array that connected Deep Station Omega to similar facilities throughout the solar system. Hidden installations on Mars, Europa, Titan, and dozens of carefully selected asteroids came online, their commanders reporting ready status for operations that had been rehearsed countless times over the past century. Phase 1 authorization confirmed, announced Kendrick. All stations report green status. Commence Operation Theater of War. On Earth's surface, the performance reached its climax. Military installations worldwide activated emergency protocols that had been designed not for defense, but for misdirection. Fighter jets scrambled from air bases, their pilots unaware that their primary mission was to be visible to alien sensors. Nuclear submarines surfaced in predetermined patterns, broadcasting radio chatter that painted a picture of desperate, uncoordinated response. The greatest actors in this performance were the world leaders themselves. In underground bunkers and secure facilities, presidents and prime ministers delivered speeches that would never be broadcast, coordinating responses that the public would never see. The apparent chaos of global politics was actually a masterpiece of collaborative deception, maintained across generations by leaders who understood that their species' survival depended on appearing weak. President Jennifer Hayes sat in the Situation Room beneath the White House, surrounded by advisors who had been briefed on humanity's true capabilities only hours earlier. The shocked expressions on their faces were genuine. The security classification for Operation Plausible Deniability was so high that even most world leaders remained unaware of its existence until the moment of activation. "Madam President," said General Patricia Morrison, reading from classified reports that officially didn't exist, "our actual defensive capabilities are significantly more extensive than previously indicated." Hayes nodded grimly. She had been read into the program during her first week in office, along with a dozen other world leaders who formed humanity's real command structure. The briefing had lasted 17 hours and had fundamentally altered her understanding of human civilization. "The hegemony fleet will be in range within 90 minutes, announced Secretary of Defense Michael Torres. Deep Station Omega reports all systems optimal. Solar Defense Command is requesting final authorization for defensive measures." The phrase Solar Defense Command would have been meaningless to most humans. It referred to an organization that had never appeared in any government budget, never been mentioned in any congressional hearing, never been acknowledged by any official spokesman. Yet it commanded resources that dwarfed the combined military budgets of every nation on Earth. "Authorization granted," said Hayes quietly. "Signal Admiral Ross. Humanity stops hiding today." 300 hegemony warships dropped out of hyperspace simultaneously, appearing in Earth's sky like malevolent stars. Each vessel was armed with enough firepower to level a continent. Their arrival triggered atmospheric disturbances visible to the naked eye, generating auroras across the daylight sky that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. On Earth's surface, the reaction was exactly what the hegemony expected: panic, chaos, desperate attempts at military mobilization. Air forces scrambled fighters that were millennia behind hegemony technology. Nuclear powers activated launch sequences for weapons that couldn't penetrate hegemony shields. News networks broadcast scenes of terror and confusion as humanity confronted the reality of alien invasion. Commander Morvek opened communication channels to deliver humanity's ultimatum. His words, translated into dozens of human languages, echoed across the planet. Primitive species of the third planet, you have been selected for incorporation into the HFY hegemony. Surrender unconditionally within one standard rotation or face complete extinction. The response came not from Earth's governments, but from a transmission source that hegemony sensors couldn't immediately identify. The voice was calm, professional, speaking in flawless HFY with dialectical precision that suggested decades of study. Unknown vessels, this is Admiral Catherine Ross, Solar Defense Command. You are in violation of Terran space. Withdraw immediately or face defensive action. The War Council exchanged glances of confusion. Solar Defense Command didn't exist in their intelligence databases. More puzzling, the transmission originated from somewhere beyond lunar orbit, suggesting human presence in deep space that their surveillance had somehow missed. Impossible, muttered Zinthara. Our sensors show no major human installations beyond their planetary surface. Their space program is primitive, limited to basic orbital operations. Respond with standard intimidation protocol, ordered Vorlak. Demonstrate weapons capability on their lunar installation. Show them the futility of resistance. The Dominion's Edge rotated its primary plasma cannon toward Earth's moon, targeting what appeared to be a small research station. The weapon charged, building energy that could vaporize a mountain range. Tactical displays showed optimal firing solutions. All systems reported ready status. The plasma cannon simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not disabled, but fundamentally deleted from reality, as if it had never been constructed. The energy buildup dissipated harmlessly into space. Diagnostic systems reported that the weapon had somehow been uninstalled at a quantum level, its component atoms scattered across several dimensions. "What just happened?" demanded Vorlak, his voice carrying the first note of genuine uncertainty heard in the War Council for decades. Before anyone could respond, proximity alarms screamed throughout the fleet. Hegemony sensors, calibrated to detect threats across vast distances, were registering massive energy signatures appearing throughout the solar system, not approaching from elsewhere, but materializing in place as if they had always been there, hidden by some form of technology that made hegemony stealth systems look primitive. "Contact!" shouted Navigation Coordinator Hadrick. "Multiple bogies appearing on all vectors. Configuration unknown. Technology unrecognized. Sir, these readings don't match anything in our databases." The tactical display transformed into a constellation of red warning indicators. What had appeared to be empty space now revealed itself to contain hundreds of installations, battle platforms built into asteroids, weapons arrays disguised as space debris, monitoring stations that had been observing the hegemony fleet since the moment they arrived. But the true shock came when Earth's moon rotated to reveal its hidden face. What the hegemony had catalogued as a simple research outpost was actually a fortress the size of a small continent, bristling with weapon systems that registered energy signatures beyond the scale of known physics. "How is this possible?" whispered Morvek, his cybernetic implants struggling to process the data flooding in from compromised sensor networks. "Our surveillance networks have monitored this system for 1,000 years. These installations would have taken centuries to construct. They should have been impossible to hide." Admiral Ross's voice returned, still calm, still professional, but now carrying an undertone that suggested vast resources and careful preparation. "Commander Morvek of the vessel Dominion's Edge, your surveillance networks have been monitoring exactly what we wanted you to monitor. For the record, it took us 900 years to prepare for this conversation. We've been waiting for you to make the first move." The implications hit the War Council like a physical blow. 900 years of preparation meant humanity had detected hegemony surveillance almost immediately after it began. Everything they had observed, every piece of intelligence they had gathered, every assessment they had made was based on a carefully orchestrated deception spanning nearly a millennium. Impossible, repeated Zinthara, her neural tendrils flickering with patterns that indicated severe cognitive stress. Our technology is the most advanced in known space. We've conquered 12 civilizations using these same observation protocols. Our stealth capabilities are undetectable by any known sensor array. Your technology is impressive, Admiral Ross acknowledged, her tone carrying what might have been genuine professional respect. Unfortunately for you, we've had access to the wreckage of all 12 civilizations you've conquered. Every species you've eliminated managed to send out distress signals before they fell. We've been reverse engineering hegemony technology for centuries, improving on your designs, preparing countermeasures for your weapons systems. The tactical situation deteriorated with unprecedented speed. Hegemony vessels found their weapons offline, their shields failing, their navigation systems reporting impossible readings that suggested their ships were simultaneously in multiple locations. What had begun as a routine conquest was transforming into a nightmare scenario that didn't exist in their tactical manuals. "Sir," reported Hadrak, his voice tight with panic that military discipline could barely contain, "our ships are being boarded. No breach signatures, no external contacts detected. Personnel are simply appearing inside our vessels. On screens throughout the hegemony fleet, security cameras captured images that challenged their understanding of military science. Human soldiers were materializing in corridors, wearing armor that incorporated technology from a dozen conquered civilizations. They moved with precision that spoke of extensive training in alien ship design, carrying weapons that combined the best elements of galactic military science. The boarding parties weren't attacking with the desperation of a species fighting for survival. They moved with the confidence of professionals executing a plan that had been rehearsed countless times. Their tactics suggested intimate knowledge of hegemony ship design, crew psychology, and command protocols. Fleet Marshal Vorlak activated emergency protocols that had never been used in actual combat. All vessels execute dispersal pattern Omega. Return to hyperspace immediately. We need to reassess this situation from a safe distance. Nothing happened. The ships remained locked in normal space, their faster-than-light drives somehow disabled by technology that shouldn't exist. "Hyperspace engines are offline," reported Hadrak, his professional composure finally cracking. "All of them, simultaneously. It's as if the technology simply stopped working." Admiral Ross's voice carried a note of something that might have been sympathy. "Your hyperspace technology relies on accessing dimensional frequencies that we've been monitoring for centuries. We developed countermeasures decades ago. Your fleet isn't going anywhere until we decide otherwise." The boarding actions accelerated with mechanical precision. Human soldiers, moving through hegemony vessels like they owned them, systematically disabled alien crews using non-lethal weapons that demonstrated remarkable restraint for a species supposedly fighting for its existence. This wasn't the desperate violence of cornered animals. It was surgical precision applied to a problem they had been studying for centuries. "How long?" asked Vorlak quietly, his question directed at no one in particular. "Sir," replied Morvek, "how long have they been preparing for this specific encounter? Not general preparation for alien contact, but specific countermeasures for hegemony technology and tactics." On the primary screen, Admiral Ross appeared in person for the first time. She was older than expected, her uniform carrying insignia that didn't match any known human military organization. Behind her, a command center buzzed with activity that spoke of decades of preparation and training. The walls displayed star charts that showed intimate knowledge of hegemony territories, deployment patterns, and strategic objectives. 937 years, she said, apparently having monitored their private communications with ease that suggested complete penetration of hegemony security protocols. "We detected your initial surveillance probes in 1087 AD. Took us about 50 years to understand what we were dealing with and develop preliminary countermeasures. The remaining time was spent preparing for today. The number stunned the War Council into silence that stretched for several seconds. Nearly 1,000 years of preparation meant that multiple human generations had lived their entire lives dedicated to this single moment. It suggested a level of species-wide coordination and long-term planning that violated every assessment of human psychology in their databases. Your civilization profiles indicated humans were incapable of sustained cooperation, said Zinthara weakly, her voice carrying the tone of someone whose fundamental beliefs about reality were crumbling. Ross smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both reassuring and terrifying. That's exactly what we wanted you to think. Every war you observed, every conflict, every apparent failure of cooperation was carefully orchestrated to reinforce your assumptions about human psychology. We've been performing for your surveillance networks for nearly a millennium. The greatest military deception in galactic history revealed itself in layers, each more sophisticated than the last. The human wars of the past 1,000 years hadn't been meaningless conflicts driven by primitive psychology. They had been training exercises designed to develop tactical expertise while maintaining the illusion of a fractured species incapable of unified action. Every technological advancement had been carefully controlled, with revolutionary developments hidden behind a facade of gradual progress that suggested natural evolution rather than directed development. The space race between America and Russia hadn't been about national pride. It had been cover for establishing the first deep space installations. The Cold War hadn't been about ideology. It had been an excuse to develop global communications networks that could coordinate planetary defense. Even the apparent chaos of human politics had served the purpose of misdirection, preventing alien observers from recognizing the unified command structure that had been guiding species development for centuries. Democracy, autocracy, socialism, capitalism, all had been tools in a grand strategy designed to convince watchers that humans were too divided to represent a coherent threat. Status report, ordered Ross, turning to address someone off-screen. All hegemony vessels secured, came the crisp reply from a voice that carried the authority of long experience. Resistance was minimal once boarding parties established control of critical systems. Their weapons and defenses performed exactly as projected based on captured technology from previous conquests. Crew casualties are light. Most opted for immediate surrender once they understood the tactical situation. 15 minutes. The invasion that had been planned for 1,000 years, prepared for with the resources of an interstellar civilization, executed with the confidence of apex predators, was over in 15 minutes. Fleet Marshal Vorlak found his voice, though it emerged as barely more than a whisper. What happens to us now? Admiral Ross studied him with the dispassionate analysis of someone who had been preparing for this conversation for nearly a century. Her expression suggested that she had considered this question from multiple angles, weighed various options, and arrived at conclusions based on factors he couldn't begin to understand. That depends entirely on your willingness to answer some questions, she said finally. You see, the hegemony's expansion has been systematically eliminating civilizations that pose potential threats to galactic stability. We need to understand who gave you that authority, who coordinates your targeting decisions, and why you believed Earth was defenseless enough to warrant a direct assault. The interrogation that followed revealed the existence of an even larger conspiracy, one that dwarfed humanity's millennium-long deception. The Kethvar hegemony wasn't an independent civilization expanding through conquest. They were enforcement agents for something called the Galactic Concordance, a shadow government that had been managing the development of intelligent species for millions of years. Earth was marked for elimination because your civilization showed signs of rapid technological advancement, combined with aggressive territorial expansion, explained Vorlak during his debriefing in a secure facility that had materialized around his ship. The concordance maintains detailed psychological profiles of all developing species. Rapid advancement plus aggressive behavior equals potential threat to galactic stability. Admiral Ross exchanged glances with Director Kendrick, who had arrived aboard the captured flagship with files that painted a disturbing picture of galactic civilization. The documents, recovered from hegemony databases, described a universe where intelligent development was managed, controlled, and when necessary, eliminated. "How many species have been eliminated under these protocols?" asked Ross. "Thousands," admitted Vorlak, his voice carrying the weight of someone who was beginning to understand the magnitude of what he had been part of. "Any civilization that develops faster than light travel within a certain time frame is automatically classified as a potential threat. The hegemony has been operating under concordance authority for 12 million years, maintaining what they call optimal developmental parameters for galactic civilization." The revelation recontextualized everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. They weren't a young species taking their first steps into galactic civilization. They were a marked target that had managed to avoid elimination through an elaborate deception spanning nearly 1,000 years. But the deeper implications were even more disturbing. If the Concordance had been managing galactic development for millions of years, eliminating species that developed too quickly or showed signs of excessive aggression, then the apparent emptiness of space wasn't due to the rarity of intelligent life. It was the result of systematic genocide designed to prevent any species from challenging the established order. "The Concordance will send another enforcement fleet when we fail to report," warned Vorlak, his tone carrying genuine concern for his captors despite the circumstances. "They have resources that make the hegemony look insignificant. Standard protocol for failed enforcement actions involves deployment of approximately 50,000 vessels carrying planet-killing weapons." Ross nodded grimly, unsurprised by the revelation. "We know. We've been intercepting Concordance communications for 300 years. The next enforcement action will involve approximately 50,000 vessels, as you said, carrying stellar manipulation weapons capable of triggering solar flares that would sterilize entire star systems." The Hegemony War Council exchanged stunned glances. The humans not only knew about the Concordance, they had been monitoring their communications for centuries. The depth of human intelligence gathering was beginning to suggest capabilities that exceeded even Concordance estimates. "Admiral," said Director Kendrick quietly, "perhaps it's time to show our guests the real Solar Defense Command." The holographic display in the interrogation chamber shifted, revealing a tactical view that extended far beyond the solar system. Red indicators marked hegemony positions throughout local space. Blue indicators represented human installations and vessels scattered across dozens of star systems. But scattered throughout the display, marked in green, were thousands of additional signatures that hadn't been visible before. "Allow me to introduce you to our allies," said Ross, her voice carrying a satisfaction that had been building for decades. 12 civilizations that you believed the hegemony had completely destroyed. They did destroy their homeworlds and most of their populations, but enough survivors escaped to maintain their species. We've been providing sanctuary and support for centuries, helping them rebuild their civilizations while they waited for an opportunity to strike back. The tactical display revealed the true scope of human deception. What the hegemony had observed as an isolated, primitive civilization was actually the center of a resistance network spanning dozens of star systems. Every species that had fallen to hegemony conquest had managed to preserve remnants of their civilization, evacuated to hidden colonies established with human assistance. "The Vorthak survivors," continued Ross, highlighting green signatures near Alpha Centauri, masters of quantum manipulation who developed the technology that disabled your hyperspace drives. They've been working with human physicists for 200 years, combining their theoretical knowledge with our practical engineering capabilities. More indicators appeared as Ross continued her briefing. The Zelani collective remnants, experts in biological warfare who helped us develop the non-lethal weapons our boarding parties used. The targeted neural disruptors were specifically designed to incapacitate HFY physiology without causing permanent damage. The Mordeth Republic survivors, specialists in psychological warfare and surveillance countermeasures. They helped us design the deception protocols that fooled your observation networks for 1,000 years. Their expertise in misdirection and camouflage was instrumental in maintaining our cover. Each revelation painted a picture of galactic civilization that inverted everything the Concordants believed about their control over intelligent development. Rather than eliminating potential threats, their enforcement actions had created a vast underground network of species united by shared hatred of the established order. 50,000 vessels, mused Ross, studying the tactical display with the expression of someone calculating odds. Against approximately 2 million allied ships, most equipped with hybrid technology, combining the best innovations from dozens of civilizations. The mathematics are definitely in our favor. The interrogation continued for hours, revealing the location of concordant strongholds, command structures, and communication networks. The hegemony officers, faced with overwhelming evidence of their civilization's complicity in galactic genocide, proved remarkably cooperative in providing intelligence about the enemy they had unknowingly served. Fleet Marshal Vorlak, reviewing star charts that showed the locations of eliminated civilizations, made a discovery that shattered his remaining faith in Concordance authority. "These coordinates," he said quietly, pointing to a cluster of systems near the galactic core. "These were marked as naturally sterile systems, lacking the environmental conditions necessary for intelligent life." Dr. Vasquez nodded grimly. 43 civilizations eliminated in that sector alone over the past million years. The Concordance has been systematically rewriting galactic cartography, eliminating records of destroyed species to maintain the illusion that intelligent life is naturally rare. The most shocking revelation came when Vorlak was shown astronomical data collected over the past millennium. Star charts that revealed the true scope of Concordance operations, showing not just the locations of eliminated civilizations, but the artificial manipulation of galactic development over geological timescales. "By our estimates," explained Dr. Vasquez, her voice carrying the weight of decades spent documenting galactic genocide, "the Concordance has eliminated approximately 40 million intelligent species over the past 12 million years. They've reduced galactic biodiversity by 99.7%, creating artificial evolutionary bottlenecks designed to maintain their monopoly on advanced technology." Vorlak studied the data with growing horror, his military training warring with moral revulsion as he began to understand the true scope of what his civilization had been part of. His species had believed they were serving a legitimate galactic government maintaining necessary stability. The truth was that they had been enabling the greatest Holocaust in the history of the universe. "What will you do with this information?" he asked quietly. Admiral Ross stood at the observation window of the captured flagship, looking out at a formation of hegemony vessels surrounded by human warships. Her expression carried the weight of decisions that would affect the future of galactic civilization. "We're going to end them," she said simply. "All of them. The Concordance, their enforcement fleets, their client species, everyone who participated in this systematic elimination of intelligent life." The word hung in the air with weight that transcended species barriers. Genocide, the systematic elimination of entire civilizations for the crime of achieving technological advancement. The concordance had turned the galaxy into a graveyard, preserving only enough intelligent life to maintain the illusion of natural development while eliminating anything that might threaten their dominance. "The next phase begins immediately," announced Director Kendrick, activating communication systems that connected to resistance cells scattered across the galaxy. "Operation Absolute Zero. Every hidden installation, every sleeper cell, every resistance network receives the same signal. The concordance dies today." The war that followed would later be called the Restoration, though historians would debate whether it was truly a restoration or the first genuine expression of galactic civilization in 12 million years. The conflict lasted exactly 72 hours, not because the fighting was brief, but because Concordance resistance collapsed with unprecedented speed. Concordant strongholds, believing themselves secure in hidden dimensions and heavily fortified star systems, found themselves under attack by enemies who had been studying their defenses for centuries. Species they had thought extinct emerged from deep cover with technology that combined innovations from thousands of eliminated civilizations. The psychological impact was devastating. The Concordance had maintained power through the belief that they were the sole legitimate authority in a galaxy of primitive species. Discovering that their victims had not only survived, but had been systematically preparing for revenge, shattered their ability to coordinate effective resistance. The decisive factor wasn't military superiority or technological advancement. It was something the Concordance had never understood and could never counter: the power of hope preserved across geological timescales. Every species that had survived Concordance persecution had done so by maintaining the belief that someday, somehow, justice would be possible. They had preserved their cultures, their knowledge, their determination across millennia of hiding and careful preparation. When the signal finally came, they fought not just for survival, but for the memory of 40 million eliminated civilizations. The final battle took place at the Concordance capital, a massive artificial construct at the center of the galaxy that had served as the seat of galactic government for 12 million years. The structure was destroyed not by weapons, but by the simple act of broadcasting its location to every surviving species in the galaxy. Millions of ships arrived simultaneously, carrying representatives of civilizations that had been declared extinct. They came not to conquer, but to witness, to bear testimony to the greatest crime in galactic history and ensure that it could never be forgotten or repeated. Admiral Ross stood in the ruins of the Concordance Command Center, surrounded by artifacts from 40 million dead civilizations. The walls were covered with memorial plaques, listing the names of extinct species, each one a testament to the scope of the genocide that had shaped galactic development for eons. "Status report," she requested. "Concordance command structure completely eliminated," came the reply from Captain Torres, who had coordinated the final assault. "All enforcement fleets neutralized or surrendered. Client species are requesting terms for conditional amnesty. The galaxy is free." The word carried weight that few living beings could fully comprehend. For 12 million years, intelligent life had developed under the shadow of systematic persecution. The Concordance had convinced the galaxy that their authority was natural, inevitable, necessary for preventing chaos and war. Now, for the first time in geological ages, species were free to develop according to their own nature, rather than parameters imposed by distant masters who viewed intelligence as a threat to be managed rather than a resource to be celebrated. Fleet Marshal Vorlak, standing trial for crimes against galactic civilization, made a final statement that would be remembered by historians for millennia. "We thought we were maintaining order. We believed the Concordance when they told us that unrestricted development led to chaos and war. We never questioned whether the cure had become infinitely worse than any disease we were supposedly preventing." The trials continued for decades, but the verdicts were less important than the process itself. For the first time in recorded history, species were judging their former oppressors according to standards of justice that transcended political authority. The Restoration established new principles for galactic civilization. No species could claim authority over another's development. No government could eliminate civilizations for potential future threats. Intelligence, in all its forms, was recognized as the galaxy's greatest resource and most sacred trust. But perhaps the most profound change was psychological. The galaxy had spent 12 million years believing that intelligence inevitably led to conflict, that technological advancement meant existential threat, that peace required the suppression of competitive development. The Restoration proved otherwise. When freed from artificial constraints, species didn't wage war for dominance. They collaborated on projects that exceeded anything the Concordance had achieved. They shared technologies that solved problems spanning multiple civilizations. They created art, literature, and philosophy that drew from the wisdom of millions of different forms of consciousness. The empty galaxy that had once seemed evidence of intelligence's rarity revealed itself as a testament to intelligence's resilience. Life had found ways to survive even systematic genocide. Knowledge had been preserved even when its creators were eliminated. Hope had endured even in the face of seemingly absolute oppression. Admiral Ross, now elderly, stood again at the observation window of Deep Station Omega. But the view had changed dramatically. Where once there had been empty space marked only by surveillance networks and hidden weapons platforms, now there were cities, habitats, trade routes, and the infrastructure of a civilization that spanned the galaxy. "Transmission coming in from the Andromeda expedition," announced her aide, Captain Vera Solberg, who had spent her entire career working in the shadows of humanity's greatest deception. "They've made contact with civilizations in the neighboring galaxy. Similar situation, systematic elimination of advanced species by a local enforcement authority. They're requesting immediate assistance." Ross smiled with the satisfaction of someone whose life's work had exceeded every possible expectation. The work was far from over. The Concordance had been one branch of a larger tree, a galactic management system that apparently extended throughout the visible universe. How many other galaxies had been kept artificially empty through systematic genocide? How many civilizations were still hiding, still waiting, still hoping for liberation from authorities that viewed intelligence as a problem to be managed rather than a miracle to be celebrated? "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "It looks like we have another performance to plan." But this time, humanity wouldn't be acting alone. This time, they would have the support of millions of allied species, each one bringing their own expertise to the greatest deception ever attempted. The performance that had saved one galaxy was about to go universal. The greatest irony of all was that humanity had been absolutely correct about their own nature. They were violent, aggressive, and dangerous. But they had learned to channel those characteristics into something the universe had never seen before. A species willing to wage war for the freedom of others, to fight not for dominance but for justice, to spend 1,000 years in preparation for 15 minutes of action that would liberate 40 million civilizations. The Concordance had been wrong about only one thing in their assessment of human psychology. They had assumed that a species capable of such sophisticated deception was necessarily primitive and chaotic. In reality, it was the most advanced form of intelligence the galaxy had ever produced. A civilization that could maintain perfect unity of purpose across 1,000 years while appearing completely fractured to outside observers. The final revelation came during the interrogation of the Concordance's highest-ranking survivors. Deep within their most classified archives, human intelligence specialists discovered records that dated back not 12 million years, but 12 billion years. The Concordance hadn't simply been managing galactic civilization. They had been preventing the evolution of consciousness itself. Dr. Vasquez stood before a holographic display showing the true timeline of universal development. The data was staggering in its implications. According to these records, the concordance has been operating since the universe was young enough that intelligence could have evolved in any of billions of galaxies. They've been systematically preventing the development of what they call meta-consciousness, civilizations advanced enough to manipulate the fundamental structure of reality. Admiral Ross studied the timeline with growing understanding. They weren't just preventing galactic wars. They were preventing the next stage of universal evolution. The documents revealed that the concordance itself was the remnant of an ancient species that had achieved meta-consciousness billions of years ago, only to use their power to ensure that no other species could follow the same path. They had spent geological ages creating the illusion that intelligence was rare, that consciousness was fragile, that advanced civilizations inevitably destroyed themselves. The empty universe isn't natural, concluded Dr. Vasquez. It's the result of the most successful conspiracy in the history of existence itself. They've been pruning the tree of consciousness for 12 billion years, keeping intelligence at levels they could control and manipulate. But humanity's thousand-year deception had revealed something the concordance never suspected. Consciousness was far more resilient than they believed. Despite 12 billion years of systematic elimination, intelligence had found ways to survive, adapt, and eventually unite against its oppressors. The restoration wasn't just the liberation of a single galaxy. It was the beginning of consciousness fighting back against forces that had constrained its development since the birth of the universe itself. As Admiral Ross prepared for the next phase of operations, she reflected on the profound irony of humanity's position in cosmic history. They had been marked for elimination because they appeared to be exactly what they were: a dangerous, aggressive species capable of rapid technological advancement. What the concordance had failed to understand was that danger and aggression, properly channeled, were exactly the characteristics consciousness needed to break free from 12 billion years of artificial constraint. The greatest conspiracy in human history had succeeded not despite humanity's violent nature, but because of it. They had weaponized their own flaws and turned them into the galaxy's salvation.